I was stupid and left the timer running when I went to eat lunch, and I have to. Well, that's better than working without the timer running. So all I have to do to fix it is work for 22 minutes and then start it again, and then it'll be active. So anyway, with what do we compete represents another strategic question focused on the people, technologies, and processes that create the capability to deliver that value to customers. Culture serves as the conduit to help attract and retain the right people for these capabilities, as well as guide their behavior to help maximally deliver the customer value. Leading HR guru. Dave Ulrich argues that effective cultures are the ones where the values internally relate directly to the value that customers seek from that company. For example, he notes a negative New York Times story about Amazon's practices, some of which, if true, are unethical and the demanding, rigorous, and driven culture. And then that's why people buy from Amazon. They cite the low cost, predictable short time frame for delivery, and ease of working with them. Making this point, he asks his audience what type of culture Amazon needs to provide those valued outcomes to their customers. Obviously, Amazon needs a culture of discipline, standardization, and rigor and precision in order to meet the expectations customers have that cause them to want to buy from Amazon rather than somewhere else. So in order for firms to be maximally effective and efficient, both their strategy and their culture can need to be aligned with regard to the value that they will provide to the customers. Talent. Before going too far, it's important to define what we mean by talent. Talent is a term thrown around quite a bit, but one that illustrates the problem of people using the same vocabulary but different dictionaries. For instance, some firms view talent as the current and future leaders in the company. Others view talent. That'd be hilarious if I accidentally live stream stuff. Widely as anyone who can have a positive impact on the firm's performance. Finally, some firms view talent as those individuals who can have a disproportionate, either positive or negative impact on the firm. We are going to emphasize the latter definition as a means of providing a clearer approach to how a strategic approach to HR can be implemented. So they view talent as those individuals who can have a disproportionate impact on the firm. Yeah, but if you have a negative impact, you're not talented. So why the heck would they consider that to be the definition? Early on in the field of strategic HR, many authors thought to develop typologies for what kinds of HR practices might be associated with different strategies. However, more recent attempts to link HR to strategy have focused on integrating the strategy, capabilities, and people through an understanding the value chain of an organization. This entails identifying where a firm seeks to create the greatest value and the talent necessary to do so. Remember that earlier in this chapter, we referred to the major strategic questions as being: where do we compete, how do we compete, and with what do we compete? Linking talent and strategy entails focusing on integrating the how and with what questions. I wonder if I'm even going to get through this whole thing reading the entire thing out loud. The value chain is a model that breaks up all of the different parts of the organization into a variety of capabilities such as research and development, R&D, supply chain, manufacturing, distribution, and service. The first step for decision makers is to determine where in the value chain they seek to create the most value for customers. Remember earlier in the chapter when we referred to the question of how do we compete in terms of what differentiates our product or service in a way that makes customers want to buy from us rather than our competitors. To link that discussion to this one, if a firm seeks to provide value through innovation, then that means that firm must be world-class in its R&D capability. If the firm seeks to be the lowest cost, it must be world-class in either its supply chain or manufacturing capabilities. Again, this links the how question with the with what do we compete question. By understanding the capabilities necessary to provide the strategic value to customers. For instance, most readers of this book would love to own a Tesla. Elon Musk's company has been able to design beautiful electronic electric automobiles. However, it has not been able to make money because it currently does not possess sufficient capability to actually manufacture the cars. In fact, some are beginning to suggest that, like Apple, Tesla would be better off outsourcing the manufacturing of the cars to a company better at manufacturing and let Tesla focus on innovating than the technological design. The Competing Through Technology box describes how Honda has had to buy capabilities from other companies because it simply could not build them internally in a way that would allow them to compete. Next, because capabilities are made up of the combination of people, systems, and processes, firms need to identify which key talent pools, jobs, or job families must be world-class in order to build or maintain that capability, but that while all employees are inherently valuable, and their performance is necessary for the firm to succeed, certain employees provide more strategic value to the former. What former? The former needs to be good, the latter need to be among the best. Lucien Alzari, the chief HR officer at Prudential, refers to this as knowing which employee groups need to be world-class versus for those for which good is good enough. For instance, if a firm seeks to build innovation capability, it needs the best R&D scientists or the best software developers working within great business processes and equipped with the best technological systems, while its manufacturing group needs to be good because that capability does not differentiate the firm. For them, good talent is good enough. Thus, companies like Apple seek to hire great software developers to create the operating systems that are easy for customers to use, but as noted above, they outsource their manufacturing to other firms. So yeah, eat lunch. But he said they're going to a picnic thing. I wonder when they're going. This approach treats talent as being those that comprise the key groups of employees that are critical to driving value in part of the value chain that is responsible for driving value to the customer. Again, keep in mind, one of the key strategic questions revolves around choosing what value the firm will offer to customers that will make customers want to buy from them, as we saw in the previous section. One key aspect of culture has to be ensuring that the cultural values align with the value offered to customers. Finally, we think about talent by defining the groups most important to the capabilities from which the value to customers is generated. Thus, the best of all worlds is when the strategy, culture, and talent are completely aligned around customer value. Funny fun. In essence, this is what has been referred to as the vertical alignment of HR with strategy. Vertical alignment means that the HR practices and processes are aimed at addressing the strategic needs of the business, but the link between strategy and HR practices is primarily through people. This means strategically managing the talent as previously described, but also managing the larger workforce to be aligned around how the company seeks to create value for customers. For instance, as IBM moved from being a manufacturer of personal computers to being a fully integrated service provider, the types of people it needed changed significantly. Instead of employing thousands of workers in manufacturing or assembly plants, IBM increasingly needed software engineers to help write new middleware programs, and an army of consultants who could help their corporate customers to implement the systems. In addition, as IBM increasingly differentiated itself as being the integrated solutions provider, meaning it could sell the hardware, software, consulting, and service for a company's entire information technology needs. Employees needed a new mindset that emphasized cooperating across different business divisions rather than running independently. IBM's more recent transformation into the Smarter Planet increasingly relies on the use of big data to provide insights. Thus, with each change in strategy comes a change in the kinds of skills, employees, and behaviors required to execute that strategy effectively. How does the HRM function implement strategy? Through getting the right talent and supporting the right culture, as Figure 2.9 shows. It is through administering HRM practices, job analysis and design, recruitment, selection systems, training and development programs, performance management systems, reward systems, and labor relations programs. And the details of each of these HRM practices are the focus of the rest of this book. However, at this point, it is important to present a general overview of the HRM practices and their role in strategy implementation. We then discuss the various strategies companies pursue and the types of HRM systems congruent with those strategies. First, we focus on how the strategic types are implemented. Then, we discuss The HRM practice is associated with various directional strategies. HRM practices the HRM. Hey. Yeah. Water. Oi. Was I using a pencil for some of those questions? Because it looks like very light stuff here. Huh. I don't know why. It looks. I mean, I thought I was using a pen. I don't know. I guess I was using a pen. I don't know why the pen was so light colored. I thought it was like a dark black pen. The HRM function can be thought of as having 6 menus of HRM practices from which companies can choose the ones most appropriate for implementing their strategy. Each of these menus refers to a particular functional area of HRM: job analysis and design, recruitment and selection, training and development, performance management, pay structure, incentives and benefits, and labor and employee relations. These menus are presented in Table 2.3. We have all these different areas here. Job analysis and design. Few tasks or many tasks. Simple tasks or complex tasks. Few skills required, many skills required. Specific job descriptions, general job descriptions. Recruitment and selection. External sources, internal sources. Limited socialization, extensive socialization. Assessment of specific skills. Assessment of general skills. Narrow career paths, broad career paths. Training and development. Focus on current job skills. Focus on future job skills. Individual orientation, group orientation. Train few employees, train all employees. Spontaneous, unplanned, planned, systematic. Performance management, behavioral criteria, results criteria. Developmental orientation, administrative orientation. Short-term criteria, long-term criteria. Individual orientation, group orientation, which was in both of them. Pay structure, incentives and benefits. Pay weighted toward salary and benefits. Pay weighted toward incentives. Short-term incentives, long-term incentives. Emphasis on internal quality, emphasis on external quality. Equity. Emphasis on internal equity. Emphasis on external equity. Individual incentives, group incentives, labor and employee relations. Collective bargaining, individual bargaining. Top-down decision-making, participation in decision-making. Formal due process, no due process. View employees as expense, view employees as assets. Oh my gosh, we're going to read through every single one now. Job analysis and design. Companies produce a given product or service or a set of products or services, and manufacturing of these products requires that a number of tasks be performed. These tasks are grouped together to form jobs. Job analysis is the process of getting detailed information about jobs. Job design addresses what tasks should be grouped into a particular job. The way that job is designed should have an important tie to the strategy of the organization, because the strategy requires either new, different tasks or different ways of performing the same task. In addition, because many strategies entail the introduction of new technologies, this affects the way that work is performed. In general, jobs can vary from having a narrow range of tasks, much of which are simplified and require a limited range of skills, having a broad array of complex tasks requiring multiple skills. In the past, the narrow design of jobs has been used to increase efficiency, while the broad design of jobs has been associated with efforts to increase innovation. However, with the advent of total quality management methods and a variety of employee involvement programs such as quality circles, many jobs are moving towards the broader end of the spectrum. Employee recruitment and selection. Recruitment is the process through which the organization seeks applicants for potential employment. Selection refers to the process by which it attempts to identify applicants with the necessary knowledge, skills, and abilities and other characteristics that will help the company achieve its goals. Companies engaging in different strategies need different types and numbers of employees. Thus, the strategy a company is pursuing will have a direct impact on the types of employees that it seeks to recruit and select. Employee training and development. A number of skills are instilled in employees through training and development. My original plan was only to study for 1 hour. But, well, the longer I study, the easier it will be to take the test, right? A number of skills are instilled in employees. That is when I turn on the timer again because I accidentally left it out running while I was eating lunch. A number of employee training. A number of skills are instilled in employees through training and development. Training refers to a planned effort to facilitate the learning of job-related knowledge, skills, and behavior by employees. Development involves acquiring knowledge, skills, and behavior that improve employees' ability to meet the challenges of a variety of existing jobs or jobs that do not yet exist. I don't get why. Changes in strategies often require changes in the types, levels, and mixes of skills. Thus, the acquisition of strategy-related skills is an essential element of the implementation of strategy. For example, many companies have recently emphasized quality in their products, engaging in total quality management programs. These programs require extensive training of all employees in the total quality management philosophy, methods, and often other skills that ensure quality. Through recruitment, selection, training, and development, companies can obtain a pool of human resources capable of implementing a given strategy. Derp, 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 derp. Performance management is used to ensure that employees' activities and outcomes are congruent with the organization's objectives. It entails specifying those activities and outcomes that will result in the firm successfully implementing the strategy. For example, companies that are steady state, not diversified, tend to have evaluation systems that call for subjective performance assessments of managers. This stems from the fact that those above the first level managers in the hierarchy have extensive knowledge about how the work should be performed. By contrast, diversified companies are more likely to use quantitative measures of performance to evaluate managers because top managers have less knowledge about how work should be performed by those below them in the hierarchy. Similarly, executives who have extensive knowledge of the behaviors Executives who have extensive knowledge of the behaviors that lead to effective performance use performance management systems that focus on the behaviors of their subordinate managers. However, when executives are unclear about the specific behaviors that lead to effective performance, they tend to focus on evaluating the objective performance results of their subordinate managers. An example of how performance management can be aligned with strategy is provided in Figure 2.10. This comes from a firm in the healthcare industry whose strategy consisted of 5 strategic imperatives or things that the company was trying to accomplish. In this company, all individuals set performance objectives each year, and each of their objectives had to be tied to at least one of the strategic imperatives. The senior vice president of HR used the firm's technology system to examine the extent to which each business unit or function was focused on each of the imperatives. The figure illustrates the percentage of objectives that were tied to each imperative across the different units. This analysis allowed the company to determine if the mix of objectives was right, enterprise-wide, as well as within each business unit or function. Pay structure, incentives, and benefits. The pay system has an important role in implementing strategies. I keep forgetting what the last few sections are. Okay, so 1, 7, and 2. Very short sections. This is the longest one by far. The pay system has an important role in implementing strategies. First, a high level of pay and/or benefits relative to that of competitors can ensure that the company attracts and retains high-quality employees, but this might have a negative impact on the company's overall labor costs. Second, by tying pay to performance, the company can elicit specific activities and levels of performance from employees. In a study of how compensation practices are tied to strategies, researchers examined 33 high-tech and 72 traditional companies. They classified them by whether they were in a growth stage, greater than 20% inflation-adjusted increases in annual sales, or a maturity stage. Now I start this again. They found that high-tech companies within the growth stage used compensation systems that were highly geared toward incentive pay with a lower percentage of total pay devoted to salary and benefits. By contrast, compensation systems among mature companies, both high-tech and traditional, devoted a lower percentage of total pay to incentives and a higher percentage to benefits. Labor and employee relations. Whether companies are unionized or not, the general approach to relations with employees can strongly affect the potential for gaining competitive advantage. Companies can choose to treat employees as an asset that requires investment of resources or as an expense to be minimized. They have to make choices about how much employees can and should participate in decision making, what rights employees have, and what the company's responsibility is to them. The approach to a company takes in making these decisions can result in either successfully achieving its short and long-term goals or ceasing to exist. Recent research has begun to examine how companies develop extensive HRM practices that maximize performance and productivity. For example, one study of automobile assembly plants around the world found that plants that exhibited both high productivity and high quality used HRM best practices such as heavy emphasis on recruitment and hiring, compensation tied to performance, low levels of status differentiation, high levels of training for both new and experienced employees, and employee participation through structures such as work teams and problem-solving groups. Another study found that HRM systems composed of selection, testing, training, contingent pay, performance appraisal, attitude surveys, employee participation, and information sharing resulted in higher levels of productivity and corporate financial performance, as well as lower employee turnover. Finally, a recent study found that companies identified as some of the best places to work had higher financial performances than a set of matched companies that did not make the list. Similar results have also been observed in a number of other studies. In addition to the relationship between HR practices and performance in general, in today's fast-changing environment, businesses have to change quickly, requiring changes in employee skills and behaviors. In one study, the researchers found that the flexibility of HR practices, employee skills, and employee behaviors were all positively related to the firm's financial performance, but only the skill flexibility was related to cost efficiency. Although these relationships are promising, the causal direction has not yet been proven. For instance, effective HR practices should help firms perform better, but it is also true that highly profitable firms can invest more in HR practices. The research seems to indicate that although the relationship between practices and performance is consistently positive, we should not go too far out on a limb arguing that the increase in use of HR practices will automatically result in increased profitability. Strategic types. As we discussed earlier, companies can be classified by the generic strategies they pursue. These generic strategies are not what we mean by a strategic plan. They are mere similarities in the ways companies seek to compete in their industries. Various typologies have been offered, but we focus on the two generic strategies proposed by Michael Porter of Harvard Business School: cost and differentiation. According to Porter, competitive advantage stems from the company's being able to create value in its production process. Value can be created in one of two ways. First, value can be created by reducing costs. Second, value can be created by differentiating a product or service in such a way that it allows the company to charge a premium price relative to its competitors. This leads to two basic strategies. According to Porter, the overall cost leadership strategy focuses on becoming the lowest cost producer in the industry. This strategy is achieved by constructing efficient, large-scale facilities by reducing costs through capitalizing on the experience curve and by controlling overhead costs and costs in such areas as research and development, service, sales force, and advertising. This strategy provides above average returns within the industry and intends to bar other firms' entry into the industry because the firm can lower its prices below competitors' costs. The differentiation strategy, according to Porter, attempts to create the impression that the company's product or service is different from that of others in the industry they present. Differentiation can come from creating a brand image, from technology, from offering unique features, or from unique customer service. If a company succeeds in differentiating its product, it will achieve above average returns, and differentiation may protect it from price sensitivity. For instance, Dell Computer Company built its reputation of providing the lowest cost computers through leveraging its supply chain and direct selling model. However, recently they have been seen share eroding as the consumer market grows, and HP has offered more differentiated, stylish-looking computers sold through retail outlets where customers can touch and feel them. In addition, Apple has differentiated itself through its own operating system that integrates well with peripheral devices such as the iPad and iPhone. In both cases, these companies can charge a premium, albeit higher, for Apple over Dell's pricing. I use a Dell computer that I've basically had for 1 year now. The differentiation strategy, according to Porter, although all of the strategic types require competent people in a generic sense, each of these strategies also requires different types of employees with different types of behaviors and attitudes, as we noted earlier. Different strategies require employees with specific skills. They also require these employees to exhibit different role behaviors. Role behaviors are behaviors required of an individual in his or her role as a job holder in a social work environment. These role behaviors vary on a number of dimensions. Additionally, different role behaviors are required by the different strategies. For example, companies engaged in a cost strategy require employees to have a high concern for quantity and a short-term focus, to be comfortable with stability, and to be risk-averse. These employees are expected to exhibit role behaviors that are relatively repetitive and perform independently or autonomously. Thus, companies engaged in cost strategies, because of the focus on efficient production, tend to specifically define the skills they require and invest in training employees in the skill areas. They also rely on behavioral performance management systems with a large performance-based compensation component. These companies promote internally consistent pay systems with high pay differentials between superiors and subordinates. They seek efficiency through worker participation, soliciting employees' ideas on how to achieve more efficient production. By contrast, employees in companies with a differentiation strategy need to be highly creative and cooperative, to have only a moderate concern for quantity, a long-term focus, and a tolerance for ambiguity, and to be risk takers. Employees in these companies are expected to exhibit role behaviors that include cooperating with others, developing new ideas, and taking a balanced approach to process and results. Thus, differentiation companies will seek to generate more creativity through broadly defined jobs, and with general job descriptions. They may recruit more from outside, engage in limited socialization of newcomers, and provide broader career paths. training and development activities focus on cooperation. The compensation system is geared toward external equity as it is heavily driven by recruiting needs. These companies develop results-based performance management systems and divisional corporate performance evaluations to encourage risk-taking on the part of management. The evidence-based HR box describes some of the most recent research comparing commitment versus control-oriented HRM systems. Directional strategies. As discussed earlier in this chapter, strategic typologies are useful. For classifying the ways different organizations seek to compete within an industry, however, it is also necessary to understand how increasing size, growth, or decreasing it, downsizing affects the HRM function. For example, the top management team might decide that they need to invest more in product development or to diversify as a means for growth. With these types of strategies, it is more useful for the HRM function to aid in evaluating the feasibility of the various alternatives and to develop programs that support their strategic choice. Companies have used for Thanks. Companies have used 4 possible categories of directional strategies to meet objectives. Strategies emphasizing market share or operating costs are considered concentration strategies. With this type of strategy, the company attempts to focus on what it does best within its established markets and can be thought of as sticking to its knitting. Strategies focusing on market development, product development, innovation, or joint ventures make up the internal growth strategy. Companies with an internal growth strategy channel their resources towards building their existing strengths. Those attempting to integrate vertically or horizontally or to diversify are exhibiting an external growth strategy. Usually through mergers or acquisitions, this strategy attempts to expand the company's resources or to strengthen its market position through acquiring or creating new businesses. Finally, a divestment or downsizing strategy is more made up of retrenchment, divestitures, or liquidation. These strategies are observed among companies facing serious economic difficulties and seeking to pare down their operations. The human resource implications of each of these strategies are quite different. Concentration strategies require that the company maintain the current skills that exist in the organization. This requires that training programs provide a means of keeping those skills sharp among people in the organization, and that compensation programs focus on retaining people who have those skills. Appraisals in this strategy tend to be more behavioral because the environment is more certain than the behaviors necessary for effective performance and to be established through extensive experience. Internal growth strategies prevent unique staffing problems. Growth requires that a company constantly hire, transfer, and promote individuals, and expansion into different markets may change the necessary skills that professional employees must have. In addition, appraisals often consist of a combination of behaviors and results. The behavioral appraisal emphasis stems from the knowledge of effective behaviors in a particular product market and the results. Appraisals focus on achieving growth goals. Compensation packages are heavily weighted towards incentives for achieving growth goals. Training needs differ depending on the way the company attempts to grow internally. For example, if the organization seeks to expand its markets, training will focus on knowledge of each market, particularly when the company is expanding into international markets. By contrast, when the company is seeking innovation or product development, When the company is seeking innovation or product development, the training will be more of a technical nature as well as focusing on interpersonal skills such as team building. Joint ventures require extensive training in conflict resolution techniques because of the problems associated with combining people from two distinct organizational cultures. Mergers and acquisitions. Increasingly, we see both consolidation within industries and mergers across industries. For example, Procter & Gamble's acquisition of Gillette represented a consolidation, where a reduction in the number of firms within the industry. By contrast, Citicorp's merger with Travelers Group to form Citigroup represented firms from different industries, pure financial services and insurance, combining to change the dynamics within both. Whatever the type, one thing is for sure, mergers and acquisitions are on the increase and HRM needs to be involved. In addition, these mergers are more frequently consist of global mega mergers in spite of some warnings that these might not be effective. According to a report by the Conference Board, people issues may be one of the major reasons that mergers do not always live up to expectations. Some companies now heavily weigh firm cultures before embarking on a merger or acquisition. For example, prior to acquiring RX, executives at Express Scripts Incorporated interviewed senior executives and middle managers at the potential target firm in order to get a sense of its culture. In spite of this, fewer than 1/3 of the HRM executives surveyed said that they had a major influence in how mergers are planned. Yet 80% of them said that people issues have a significant impact after the deals are finalized. In addition to the desirability of HRM playing a role in evaluating a merger opportunity, HRM certainly has a role in the actual implementation of a merger or acquisition. Training in conflict resolution is also necessary when companies engage in an external growth strategy. All the options for external growth consist of acquiring or developing new businesses, and these businesses often have distinct cultures. Thus, many HRM programs face problems in integrating and standardizing practices across the company's businesses. The relative value of standardizing practices across businesses must be weighed against the unique environmental requirements of each business and the extent of the desired integration of the two firms. For example, with regard to pay practices, a company may desire a consistent internal wage structure to maintain employee perceptions and equity in a larger organization. In a recent new business developed by IBM, the employees pressure the company to maintain the same wage structure as IBM's main operation. However, some businesses may function in environments where pay practices are driven heavily by market forces. Requiring these businesses to adhere to pay practices in other environments may result in an ineffective wage structure. Downsizing. Of increasing importance to organizations in today's competitive environment is HRM's role in downsizing or right-sizing. Funny word. The number of organizations undergoing downsizing increased significantly from the third to the fourth quarter of 2008, and also this trend has slowed. Layoffs are still significant. In fact, some of these layoffs were due to outright bankruptcies because the firms simply did not have sustainable business models. In addition, even though as the economy has grown, layoffs continue in companies that face challenging environments. For instance, by partway through 2016, Macy's announced 4,350 job cuts, Microsoft 4,700 job cuts, and Intel 12,000 job cuts, Halliburton 15,200 job cuts, and Walmart 17,500 job cuts. A recent review of the downsizing literature noted that downsizing tends to fall short of meeting companies' financial organizational objectives, and it has negative effects on employee morale and productivity. What is this? One would have great difficulty ignoring the massive war for talent. That went on during the late 1990s, particularly with the notable dot-com craze. Firms during this time sought to become employers of choice, to establish employment brands, and to develop employee value propositions as ways to ensure that they would be able to attract and retain talented employees. The Competing through Environmental, Social, and Governance Practices box describes the results of a survey of over 400 CEOs around the globe and how they focus on talent and culture as critical parts of their job. The dynamic economic conditions requiring firms to constantly churn their workforces. It's one important question facing firms is how can how can we develop a reputation as an employer of choice and engage employees to the goals of the firm while laying off a significant portion of our workforce? How firms answer this question will determine how they can compete by meeting the stakeholder needs of their employees. In spite of the increasing frequency of downsizing, research reveals that it is far from universally successful for achieving the goals of increased productivity and increased profitability. For example, Figure 2.4 illustrates the results of a survey conducted by the American Management Association, indicating that only about 1/3 of the companies that went through downsizing actually achieved their goal of increased profits. Another survey by the AMA found that over 2/3 of the companies that downsize repeat the effort a year later. Also, research by the consulting firm Mitchell & Company found that companies that downsized during the 1980s lagged the industry average stock price in 1991. Thus, it is important to understand the best ways of managing downsizings, particularly from the standpoint of HRM. Downsizing presents a number of challenges and opportunities for HRM. In terms of challenges, HRM function must surgically reduce the workforce by cutting only the workers who are less valuable in their performance. Achieving this is difficult because the best workers are most able and often willing to find alternative employment and may leave voluntarily prior to any layoff. For example, in 1992, General Motors and the UAW agreed to an early retirement program for individuals between the ages of 51 and 65 who had been employed for 10 or more years. The program provided those who agreed to retire their full pension benefits even if they obtained employment elsewhere, and as much as $13,000 toward the purchase of a GM car. As mentioned earlier in the chapter, this is part of GM's labor cost problem. Early retirement programs, although humane, essentially reduce the workforce with a grenade approach. This type of reduction does not distinguish between good and poor performers, but rather eliminates an entire group of employees. In fact, recent research indicates that when companies downsize by offering early retirement programs, they usually end up rehiring to replace essential talent within a year. Often, the company does not achieve its cost-cutting goals because it spends 50 to 150% of the departing employees' salaries in hiring and retraining new workers. Another HRM challenge is to boost the morale of employees who remain after the reduction. This topic is discussed. Survivors may feel guilt over keeping their jobs when their friends have been laid off, or they may envy their friends who have retired with attractive severance and pension benefits. Their reduced satisfaction with and commitment to the organization may interfere with work performance. Thus, the HRM function must maintain open communication with the remaining employees to build their trust and commitment rather than withholding information. All employees should be informed of the purpose of the downsizing, the costs to be cut, the duration of the downsizing, and the strategies to be pursued. In addition, companies going through downsizing In addition, companies going through downsizing often develop compensation programs that tie the individual compensation to company success. Employee ownership programs often result from downsizing and gain-sharing plans such as the Scanline brand as a way to incent employees to cut costs because it will benefit them monetarily. Oh, we're almost at the end of this one. In spite of these challenges, did I seriously read this entire thing out loud? In spite of these challenges, downsizing provides opportunities for HRM. First, it allows the company to get rid of dead wood and make way for fresh ideas. In addition, downsizing is often a unique opportunity to change an organization's culture. In firms characterized by antagonistic labor management relations, downsizing. Oh crap, they're stupid. They're supposed to use a small dash, not a big dash. In firms characterized by antagonistic labor management relations, downsizing can force the parties to cooperate and to develop new positive relationships. Finally, downsizing can demonstrate to top management decision makers the value of the company's human resources to its ultimate success. The role of HRM is to effectively manage the process in a way that makes its value undeniable. We will discuss the implications of downsizing as a labor force management strategy in Chapter 5, Strategy, Evaluation, and Control. Right. Why is this part only one page? Strategy, Evaluation, and Control. A final component to the strategic management process is that of strategy, evaluation, and control. Thus far, we have focused on the planning and implementation of strategy. However, it is extremely important for the firm to constantly monitor the effectiveness of both the strategy and the implementation process. This monitoring makes it possible for the company to identify problem areas and either revise existing structures and strategies or devise new ones. In this process, we see emergent strategies appear, as well as the critical nature of human resources and competitive advantage. I don't know why we didn't have a reading about that. Weren't we supposed to talk about strategy evaluation? I wonder why we never talked about strategy evaluation. like if we were to go to the next section. I have to go to the bath. So, that's funny. That's very funny. Sniff, 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 sniff. Okay, let's see how far we've gotten. Ooh, I am 69% done with the reading. Good job. The last 3 readings are 1 page long, 7 pages long, and 2 pages long. This 4th reading is only 1 page long. Wow, look at this. Very short. Okay. The legal system in the United States. The foundation for the U.S. legal system is set forth in the United States Constitution, which affects HRM in 2 ways. First, it delineates a citizen's constitutional rights on which the government cannot impinge. Most individuals are aware of the Bill of Rights, the first of 10 amendments to the Constitution, but other amendments, such as the 14th Amendment, also influence HRM practices. The 14th Amendment, called the Equal Protection Clause, states that all individuals are entitled to equal protection under the law. Second, the Constitution established 3 major governing bodies. The legislative, executive, and judicial branches. The Constitution explicitly defines the roles and responsibilities of each of these branches. Each branch has its own areas of authority, but these areas have often overlapped and the borders between the branches are often blurred. Legislative branch. The legislative branch of the federal government consists of the House of Representatives and the Senate. These bodies develop laws that govern many HRM activities. Most of the laws stem from a perceived societal need. For example, during the Civil Rights Movement of the early 1960s, The legislative branch moved to ensure that various minority groups received equal opportunities in many areas of life. One of these areas was employment, and thus Congress enacted Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. Similar perceived societal needs have brought about labor laws, such as Occupational Safety and Health Act, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, the Anti-Discrimination in Employment Act, and more recently the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 and the Civil Rights Act of 1981. Executive branch. The executive branch consists of the President of the United States and the many regulatory agencies the President oversees. Although the legislative branch passes the laws, the executive branch affects these laws in many ways. First, the President can propose bills to Congress that, if passed, could become laws. Second, the President has the power to veto any law passed by Congress, thus ensuring that few laws are passed without presidential approval, which allows the President to influence how laws are written. Third, the regulatory agencies under the authority of the President have responsibility for enforcing the laws. Thus, a President can influence what types of violations are pursued. For example, many laws affecting employment discrimination are enforced by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission under the Department of Justice during President Jimmy Carter's administration. The Department of Justice brought a lawsuit against the Birmingham, Alabama Fire Department for not having enough black firefighters. This suit resulted in a consent decree that required blacks to receive preferential treatment in hiring and promotion decisions. 2 years later, during Ronald Reagan's administration, the Department of Justice sided with white firefighters in a lawsuit against the city of Birmingham, alleging that the preferential treatment required by the consent decree discriminated against white firefighters. Fourth, the President can issue executive orders, which sometimes regulate the activities of organizations that have contracts with the federal government. For example, Executive Order 11246, signed by President Lyndon Johnson, required all federal contractors and subcontractors to engage in affirmative action programs designed to hire and promote women and minorities within their organizations. Fifth, the President can influence the Supreme Court to interpret laws in certain ways. When particularly sensitive issues come before the court, the Attorney General's office, representing the executive branch, argues for certain preferred outcomes. For example, one court case involved a white female school teacher who was laid off from her job in favor of retaining a black school teacher with equal seniority and performance, with the reason given as diversity. The white woman filed a lawsuit in federal court, and the George H.W. Bush administration filed a brief on her behalf, arguing that diversity was not a legitimate reason to use race in decision-making. She won in federal court, and the school district appealed. The Bill Clinton administration, having been elected in the meantime, filed a brief on behalf of the school district, arguing that diversity was a legitimate defense. Finally, the President appoints all the judges in the federal judicial system, subject to approval from the legislative branch. This affects the interpretation of many laws. Judicial branch. The judicial branch consists of the federal court system, which is made up of 3 levels. The first level consists of the United States District Courts and quasi-judicial administrative agencies. The district courts hear cases involving alleged violations of federal laws. The quasi-judicial agencies, such as the National Labor Relations Board, which is actually an arm of the executive branch, but serves a judicial function, hear cases regarding their particular jurisdictions. In NLRB's case, disputes between unions and management. If neither party to a suit is satisfied with the decision of the court at this level, the parties can appeal the decision to the United States Courts of Appeals. These courts were originally set up to ease the Supreme Court's caseload, so appeals generally go from the federal trial level to one of the 13 appellate courts before they can be heard by the highest level, the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court must grant certiorari before hearing an appeal case. However, this is not usually granted unless two appellate courts have come to differing decisions on the same point of law, or if the case deals with an important interpretation of constitutional law. The Supreme Court serves as the court of final appeal. Decisions by the Supreme Court are binding. They can be overturned only through legislation. For example, Congress, dissatisfied with the Supreme Court's decisions in certain cases, such as Ward's Cove Packet versus Antonio, overturned those decisions through the Civil Rights Act of 1991. Having described the legal system that affects the management of human resources, we now explore some laws that regulate HRM activities, particularly equal employment opportunity laws. We first discuss the major laws that mandate equal opportunity employment opportunity in the United States. Then we examine the agencies involved in enforcing these laws. This leads us into the examination of the four theories of discrimination, with a discussion of some relevant court cases. Finally, we explore some equal employment opportunity issues facing today's man. Okay, we only have two left. A slightly longer one and a short one. This one's 7 pages. Okay, let's see what percentage of the way done we are done. Okay. So we are now 72% done. We only have a 7-page thing and a 2-page thing left. We are so close to done. Nope. Equal employment opportunity. Equal employment opportunity refers to the government's attempt to ensure that all individuals have an equal chance for employment, regardless of race, color, religion, sex, age, disability, or national origin. To accomplish this, the federal government has used constitutional amendments, legislation, and executive orders, as well as the court decisions that interpret these laws. However, equal employment laws are not the same in all countries. The major equal employment opportunity laws we discuss are summarized in this table. That's one. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery, covers all individuals. It's enforced by the court system. The 14th Amendment provides equal protection for all citizens and requires due process. And state action covers state actions, decisions of governmental organizations, and enforced by the court system. The Civil Rights Acts of 1866 and 1871, as amended, grants all citizens the right to make, perform, modify, and terminate contracts, and enjoy all benefits, terms, and conditions of the contractual relationship. Covers all individuals. Okay. The Equal Pay Act of 1963. Requires that men and women performing equal jobs receive equal pay. Employers engaged in interstate commerce, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Hurry up. Title 7 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 forbids discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Employers with 50 or more employees working 20 or more weeks per year, labor unions, and employment agencies. Age Discrimination in Employment Act of 1967 prohibits discrimination against individuals who are years of older. Rehabilitation Act of 1973 requires affirmative action in the employment of individuals with disabilities. Vietnam Veterans and Adjustment Assistance Act of 1974 prohibits discrimination against veterans. Pregnancy Discrimination Act prohibits discrimination on the basis of pregnancy, childbirth, or Native American conditions. Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities. Civil Rights Act of 1991 prohibits discrimination. What the what? Executive order requires affirmative action in hiring minorities. Executive order requires the federal government base its employment policies on merit and fitness, not those other things. Constitutional amendments. The 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment of the Constitution abolished slavery in the United States, though one might be hard-pressed to cite an example of race-based slavery in the United States today. The 13th Amendment has been applied to cases where the discrimination involves the badges, symbols, and the incidents of slavery. 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment forbids the states from taking life, liberty, or property without due process of law and prevents the states from denying equal protection of the laws. Passed immediately after the Civil War, this amendment originally applied only to discrimination against blacks. It was soon broadened to protect other groups such as immigrants and Asian Americans, and more recently applied to protection of whites and allegations of reverse discrimination. Okay, this court back versus California Board of Regents. Alan Back alleged that he had been discriminated against in the selection of entrance to the University of California and Davis Medical School. The university had set aside 16 of the available 100 places for disadvantaged applicants who were members of racial minority groups. Under this quota system, Back was able to compete for only 84 positions, whereas a minority applicant was able to compete for all 100. The court ruled in favor of Back, noting that this quota system had violated white individuals' right to equal protection under the law. One important point regarding the 14th Amendment is that it is applicable only to state actions. This means that only decisions or actions of the government or of private groups whose activities are deemed state actions can be construed as violations of the 14th Amendment. Thus, one could file a claim under the 14th Amendment if one were fired from a state university, but not if one were fired by a private employer. Congressional legislation. Reconstruction Civil Rights Acts 1866 and 1871. The 13th Amendment eradicated slavery in the United States, and the Reconstruction Civil Rights Acts were attempts to further this goal. The Civil Rights Act passed in 1866 was later broken into two statutes. Section that granted all persons the same property rights as white citizens. Section blah granted other rights, including the right to enter into and enforce contracts. Courts have interpreted this as granting individuals the right to make and enforce employment contracts. The Civil Rights Act of 1974 granted all citizens the right to sue in federal court if they felt they had been deprived of some civil right. Although these laws might seem outdated, they are still used because they allow the plaintiff to recover both compensatory and punitive damages. In fact, these laws came to the forefront in the Supreme Court case Patterson v. McLean Credit Union. The plaintiff had filed a discrimination complaint under this section for racial harassment. After being hired by McLean Credit Union, Patterson failed to receive any promotions or pay raises while she was employed there. She was also told that blacks worked slower than whites. Thus, she had grounds to prove discrimination and filed suit under the section, arguing that she had been discriminated against in the making and enforcement of an employment contract. The Supreme Court ruled that this situation did not fall under Section 1981 because it did not involve the making and enforcement of contracts. However, the Civil Rights Act of 1991 amended this act to include the making, performance, modification, and termination of contracts, as well as the all benefits, privileges, terms, and conditions of the contractual relationship. Equal Pay Act of 1963. The Equal Pay Act as an amendment to the Fair Labor Standards Act requires that men and women in the same organization who are doing equal work must be paid equally. The Act defines equal in terms of skill, effort, responsibility, and working conditions. However, the Act allows for reasons why men and women performing the same job might be paid differently. If the pay differences are a result of differences in seniority, merit, quantity, or quality of production, or any other factor other than sex, such as shift differentials or training programs, the differences are legally allowed. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title VII, is the major legislation regulating equal employment opportunity in the United States. It was a direct result of the civil rights movement of the early 1960s, led by such individuals as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., to ensure that employment opportunities would be based on character or ability rather than on race. Congress wrote and passed Title VII, which President Lyndon Johnson signed into law. Title VII states that it is illegal for an employer to fail or refuse to hire or discharge any individual or otherwise discriminate against any individual with respect to his compensation, terms, conditions, or privileges of employment because of such individual's race, color, religion, sex, or national origin, or to limit, segregate, or classify his employees or applicants for employment in any way that would deprive or tend to deprive any individual of employment opportunities or otherwise adversely affect his status as an employee because such individual's race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. The Act applies to organizations with 15 or more employees working 21 or more weeks a year that are involved in interstate commerce, as well as state and local governments, employment agencies, and labor organizations. The Competing Through Environmental, Social, and Governance Practices box describes how a number of women have complained that they were discriminated against at Nike. Age Discrimination in Employment Act of 1967. Passed in 1967 and amended in 1986, the Age Discrimination in Employment Act prohibits discrimination against employees over the age of 40. The Act also almost exactly mirrors Title VII in terms of its substantial provisions and procedures to be followed in pursuing a case. As with Title VII, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is responsible for enforcing this act. The ADEA was designed to protect older employees. When a firm reduces its workforce through layoffs by targeting older employees who tend to have higher pay, a firm can substantially cut labor costs. Recently, firms have often offered early retirement incentives, a possible violation of the Act because of the focus on older employees. Early retirement incentives require employees to sign an agreement waiving their rights to sue under the AEEA. Courts have tended to uphold the use of early retirement incentives and waivers as long as the individuals were not coerced into signing the agreements. The agreements were presented in a way that employees could understand and the employees were given enough time to make a decision. However, age discrimination complaints make up a large percentage of the complaints filed with the EEOC, and the number of complaints continues to grow whenever the economy is slow. For example, as we see in Figure 3.1, the number of cases increased during the early 1990s when many firms were downsizing, but then decreased as the economy expanded. The number of complaints increased again as the economy began slowing in 2000 and with the recession in 2008. These trends often stem from firms seeking to lay off older and thus higher paid employees when they're downsizing. These cases can be costly. Most are settled out of court, but such settlements run from $50,000 to $400,000 per employee in one case. Sharing Flow Corporation fired 35 35-year-old. Yeah, but it wasn't even 40. Why the heck? Hey, man. Wait, I'm confused. It must not have been the garbage in the bathroom because I replaced that this morning. That is so ironic. What the heck? I love lag. Ay, 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 ay. Oh, that was not saying this. Fun. Was that? Wait, it was playing. Dum 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 dum. I am 97% of the way done with the readings, and I only have one left, and it's this one. Ooh. As discussed previously, the executive branch of the federal government bears most of the responsibility for enforcing all equal employment opportunity laws passed by the legislative branch. In addition, the executive branch must enforce the executive orders issued by the president. The two agencies responsible for the enforcement of these laws within the executive orders are the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, an independent federal agency. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is responsible for enforcing most of the Equal Employment Opportunity laws, such as Title VII, the Equal Pay Act, and the Americans with Disability Act. The EEOC has three major responsibilities: investigating and resolving discrimination complaints, gathering information, and issuing guidelines. Investigation and resolution. Individuals who feel they have been discriminated against must file a complaint with the EEOC or a similar state agency within 180 days of the incident. They are to file a complaint within the 180 days, results in the case being dismissed immediately, with certain exceptions such as the enactment of a seniority system that has an intentionally discriminatory purpose. For instance, the Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, signed by President Barack Obama, was crafted in direct response to the 180-day window. Ledbetter had been an area manager at the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Plant in Alabama from 1979 to 1998, during which time she received lower raises than male employees. The differences were such that by the end of her career she was making $6,700 less per year than her male counterparts, and because pension law payments were related to the salary at the time of retirement, she received smaller pension payments. When she filed the lawsuit, the Supreme Court ruled that the illegal acts were the pay raise decisions themselves, which fell far outside the 180-day window. Ledbetter wanted to argue that every time she received a pension check lower than her peers, it served as an act of discrimination. Thus, Congress passed the act specifying that an illegal act occurs When a discriminatory compensation decision is adopted, an employee becomes subject to the decision, or an employee is affected by its application, including each time compensation is paid. Once the complaint is filed, the EEOC takes responsibility for investigating the claim of discrimination. The complainant must give the EEOC 60 days to investigate the complaint. If the EEOC either does not believe the complaint to be valid or fails to complete the investigation, the complainant may sue in federal court. If the EEOC determines that discrimination has taken place, its representatives will attempt to provide a reconciliation between the two parties without burdening the court system with a lawsuit. Sometimes the EEOC enters into a consent decree with the discriminating organization. This decree is an agreement between the agency and the organization that the organization will cease certain discriminatory practices and possibly institute additional and affirmative action practices to rectify its history of discrimination. If the EEOC cannot come to an agreement with the organization, it has two options. First, it can issue a right to sue letter to the alleged victim, which certifies that the agency has investigated and found validity in the victim's allegation. Second, although less likely, the agency may aid the alleged victim in bringing the suit to federal court. Information gathering. The EEOC also plays a role in monitoring the hiring practices of organizations. Each year, organizations with 100 or more employees organizations with 100 or more employees must file a report, EEO-1, with the EEOC that provides the number of women and minorities employed in 9 different job categories. The EEOC computer analyzes these reports to identify patterns of discrimination that can then be attacked through class action suits. Issuance of guidelines. A third responsibility of the EEOC is to issue guidelines that help employers determine when their decisions are violations of the laws enforced by the EEOC. These guidelines are not laws themselves, but the courts give great deference to them when hearing employment discrimination cases. For example, the Uniform Guidelines on Employee Selection Procedures is a set of guidelines issued by the EEOC, the Department of Labor. For example, the Uniform Guidelines on Employee Selection Procedures is a set of guidelines issued by the EEOC, the Department of Labor, the Department of Justice, and the U.S. Civil Service Commission. This document provides guidance on the ways an organization should develop and administer selection systems so as not to violate Title VII. The courts often refer to the Uniform Guidelines to determine whether a company has engaged in discriminatory conduct or to determine the validity of the procedures it used to validate a selection system. Another example, since the passage of the ADA, employers have been somewhat confused about the Act's implications for their hiring procedures. Therefore, the EEOC issued guidelines in the Federal Register that provide more detailed information regarding what the agency will consider legal and illegal employment practices concerning disabled individuals. Although companies are well advised to follow these guidelines, it is possible that courts will interpret the ADA differently from the EEOC. Thus, through the issuance of guidelines, the EEOC gives employers directions for making employment decisions that do not conflict with existing laws. Offers of federal contract compliance programs. The OFCCP is the agency responsible for enforcing the executive orders that cover companies doing business with the federal government. Businesses with contracts for more than $50,000 cannot discriminate in employment based on race, color, religion, national origin, or sex, and they must have a written affirmative action plan on file. These plans have 3 basic components. First, the utilization analysis compares the race, sex, and ethnic composition of the employer's workforce with that of the available labor supply for each job group. The employer must identify the percentage of its workforce with a given characteristic and identify the percentage of workers in the relevant labor market with that characteristic. If the percentage in the employer's workforce is much less than the percentage in the comparison group, then the minority group is considered to be underutilized. Second, the employer must develop specific goals and timetables for achieving balance in the workforce concerning these characteristics, particularly for underutilization. These goals and timetables specify the percentage of women and minorities that the employer seeks to have in each job group and the date by which that percentage is to be attained. These are not to be used as quotas, which entail setting aside a specific number of positions to be filled only by members of a protected class. Goals and timetables are much more flexible, requiring only that the employer have specific goals and take steps to achieve those goals. In fact, one study that examined companies with the goal of increasing black employment found that only 10% of them actually achieved their goals. Although this may sound discouragingly low, it is important to note that these companies increased their black employment more than companies that set no such goals. Third, employers with federal contracts must develop a list of action steps they would take toward attaining their goals to reduce underutilization. The company's CEO must make it clear to the entire organization that the company is committed to reducing underutilization, and all management levels must be involved in the planning process. For example, organizations can communicate job openings to women and minorities through publishing the company's affirmative action policy, recruiting at predominantly female or minority schools, participating in programs designed to increase employment opportunities for underemployed groups, and removing unnecessary barriers to employment. Organizations must also take affirmative steps towards hiring Vietnam veterans and individuals with disabilities. The OFCCP annually audits government contractors to ensure that they actively pursue their goals in their plans. These audits consist of examining the company's affirmative action plan and conducting on-site visits to examine how individual employees perceive the company's affirmative action policies. If the OFCCP finds that the contractors or subcontractors are not complying with the executive order, then its representatives may notify the EEOC if there is evidence that Title VII has been violated, advise the Department of Justice to institute criminal proceedings, request that the Secretary of Labor cancel or suspend any current contracts, and forbid the fund from bidding on future contracts. This last penalty, called the pardon, is the OFCCP's most potent weapon. Having discussed the major amounts, defining equal employment opportunity, and the agencies that enforce these laws, we now address the various types of discrimination and the ways these forms of discrimination are interpreted by the courts in a number of cases. By the way, no, we don't, because he didn't even require that reading. There's only 6 readings required. And I'm done. I finished all of the readings in 2 hours and 29 minutes. 2.5 hours. I was originally planning to only spend 1 hour studying the readings, and I spent 2.5 hours studying the readings because I decided that I could read the entire thing because it was only 33 pages. So it took me 2.5 hours to read 33 pages. That's pretty long. So then I just realized something. I remember I still got 97% on this test, but it really sucked because a bunch of the topics for the test are from a reading that he didn't even list in the readings. Yes! Because a hostile working environment. OSHAERISA, Boston Consulting Group Matrix. Thank you, buddy. Thank you for not providing us with the reading that is relevant to this test. Dude. I remember this. I still got 97% on the test, but it was despite the fact that he didn't even provide all of the readings. I looked at it. I looked at 2.1, 2.2, and there's nothing. Dude. Not cool. Stop. Oh, I think he only told us to read specific parts of the chapter. Wait. You didn't provide us with the reading. He didn't provide us with one of the readings necessary for our tests, which is very bad. He didn't do that. There is nothing. He didn't provide us with the read. Maybe it's in the PowerPoints. Oh, are you kidding me? Are you really? Okay, I guess it's gonna be the presentation. Dang it. Okay, we need to look for some stuff that's missing. So, the missing things we need is OSHA 1970, ERISA 1974, the BCG matrix, a hostile working environment, the vision statement, the values statement, the 5 forces? Yeah, I think, no, that was in our textbook. Okay, so those are a few things that we're missing, and it might be in the presentations. So we'll see if it's in the presentation. Let's see. There.
Welcome to another interactive presentation related. Strategic management is a process to strategically align organizational mission, vision, goals, and objectives of corporate, business, and functional unit of an organization to strategically achieve organizational goals. And apart from that, achieve a competitive edge over our competitors. To have a quick recap of what we've discussed related to strategic management, click on the button to watch the lecture. Let us understand the background of why organizations exist. The reason organizations exist is for multiple reasons. Number one, either they are selling a product
I can't skip ahead in the video. Oh, come on.
Or if they are delivering a service. Okay, so this is the main purpose.
Do you know how HR came to be? I'll give you the quick version. During the Industrial Revolution, quick and cheap production was a high priority for many industries. Employees, many. Do you know how HR came to be? I'll give you the quick version. During the Industrial Revolution, quick.
The strategic management process has 3 distinct yet interdependent phases. Number 1 is strategy formulation. Number 2 is implementation. Number 3 is strategy evaluation.
Here we go.
Is
this is what we need.
Explanation of the
I think I'll just write it down. Or no, I'll take a picture of it. Haha.
Purpose and its overall
cool.
intention.
Okay. I think I was struggling with this last time I took the test. I can't believe I still ended up with the 97%.
And direction to employees, customers,
oh, really?
vendors,
I can't pause.
and other stakeholders. Questions
okay,
to consider when drafting mission statements could include: what is our organization's purpose?
Time for life.
Why does our organization exist? A vision statement looks forward and creates a mental image of the ideal state that the organization wishes
There's only
to
25
achieve.
questions. We have 90 minutes to answer 25 questions.
And
Our test is going to be very easy.
Employees. Questions to consider when drafting
Hurry up.
vision statements might include: what problem are we seeking to
Hurry
solve?
up.
Where are we headed? If we achieved all strategic
Hurry up.
goals, what would we look like 10 years from now?
Open
The
it.
value statement lists the core
Open
principles
it.
that guide and direct the organization and its culture. In values in values-led organization, the values create a moral compass for the organization and its employees. It guides decision making and establishes a standard against which actions can be assessed. The core values uh, are an internalized framework that is shared and acted on by leadership. When drafting value statements, questions to consider might include: what values are unique to our organization? What values should guide the operations of our company? What conduct should our employees uphold? Thank you again for
Wait,
watching
that
this
was it?
presentation. The strategic management process has three distinct yet interdependent. Thank you again for watching this presentation. If you have
Okay,
any
now we need the
questions or
second
concerns,
presentation. Hopefully I can find everything I need in the presentations. I found the vision and mission statement stuff. Now we need some other stuff missing from what we need to study. Curious to know what is our team activity for module 4. And develop an employee benefits plan? Are you freaking kidding me? Oh, man. Okay. Where's the 2.2 presentation? There is no... Oh, come on. Come on. You didn't give us enough information for our test. Dang it. Dang it. Just dang it. Dang it. God dang it. So mad. Did I miss any questions as a result of that? I think I'm going to be safe and restart OBS because it's This could get extremely laggy because I hate myself.